Hello and welcome. Today we're going to go through deploying a simple Rshiny web app using Docker to run and test locally and hosting using an online platform called render.com. For this, we're going to need to have a couple things. One, we need Docker Desktop. I'm currently doing this on a Windows machine. I will do this also on Mac, so we can have the comparison, and also for people using different setups. So make sure you have that downloaded. You're going to want to have Git for Windows installed. All of these have the fairly simple what are they called? Loaders, and because a lot of these things you need to restart your computer each time. I won't be doing it in this little tutorial, but basically what you need is Git Bash specifically, and the rest, I mean, is nice to have, but not inherently what we're going to be using today. And then of course we need R to be installed. This install is quite nice. And this isn't something you inherently need to do, but because I will be running all of my stuff through Visual Studio Code, it is nice to be able to set the R script, which comes with, does it specify here? But essentially there is a way of running R code directly in the same way that it would run Python. You do Python space blah, or Go space blah, or whatever, depending on your language. R has now included something called Rscript, which you'll see a bit later. But there is a binary for that gets downloaded when you download this. And yeah, it is nice to set the path of this thing to your command environment, so you don't have to type the full path each time. You can just then type Rscript and then the thing that you want to run. As I mentioned earlier, I will be using Visual Studio Code because my background is using tons of different languages, and this is just nice to have a general version. I realize that for most people who are kind of set up in R, they're going to be using RStudio. In theory, the difference should be minimal. It's up to you what GUI you use to write code in. I mean, if I really fancy, I'd do it in Vim or something, but no one needs that. And then this is the repository that we will be using as our example. Make sure to git clone this. And this is the platform we will be hosting our deploy on. So let us get started. Yeah, so I'm just going to show a couple variants of what we've got here. If everything is set up correctly, then this should be what you want. So Control J opens our terminal. The default terminal in Windows is Command. What you want to do is grab your Git Bash thing, navigate to the folder that you want to git clone install, and just grab the command. You can do this obviously from GitHub. Also, I'll list all of the links that I talk about in the description, so you don't have to keep jumping around. And for this, it's Control C and then Control Shift V to get it in there. Because I've done this already, I'm not going to do that, but this is essentially how you then clone into it. So that's nice. We've then git cloned, and once this happens, you will then be in your setup, and then you'll need to open it. So you can just do cd works within commands. I usually work within Linux and Mac, so you might watch me struggling a bit with the commands here and there. But basically, this is kind of the directory setup that we have. I have a bunch of other smaller data science things going on, and then this is of course the one we want. So we're going to go bam, 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 and now we're in the working directory we need to be. Here I'm then running the R script. This is the moment where you would want to making sure you've downloaded all the stuff we mentioned earlier. Set the path. And so, because my memory is garbage, I'm going to quickly grab the beginning. So this is this. Control V again. And because Windows really likes to make it difficult to find stuff, oopsie daisy, they add extra quotations for certain things. But basically, we know that we have program files. We know that we have an R install that we just installed. We don't, well, I guess we can also look at the version, but as long as you only have one version of R installed, it will auto-complete to the correct one. And then within that folder, we know that there is a folder called bin. And so we can set our path here. And then if we run specific lines that relate to what we've set in our path, we should be able to run them directly. So if we just check the version of Rscript real quick, we know that the version is what we matched and that the thing is set correctly. So that's exciting. Oh yeah, in fact, before we run it, shall we just take a quick look at what we've got? There's a couple libraries and stuff that you'll need to install. If you're using VS Code, make sure to get the R plugin and set up the environment. So you have this attached R set up, and then you get this thing going. Yeah, then you can install directly from CRAN. So I've just done this already. So you want Shiny, you want Plotly, and you will want Shiny themes. These are 3 things you need. All of the rest that I use, so ggplot, for example, comes with Plotly, I believe, or maybe Shiny. So you don't have to install that inherently. So just those 3. Here we're specifying where the web app will be placed. So our local host default is 0000. So when we run it, we will open localhost at our Shiny port. And then a bunch of like minor things. It's not a very complicated application. Grab some CSS from from Google. I'm using the fonts from them. Grab the custom CSS file that we wrote. It's very simple again, just setting some colors, the padding of some stuff, where the footer will be, etc. The footer, very simple, just some HTML saying it's me, and then going to the website that hosts some services that I offer. Yeah, that's about that. Grabbing a Shiny theme as well, because we can't be bothered to write full CSS for the things that we do. It's always nice to reuse stuff. Header panel, side panels with stuff that you can select. We're showing, by the way, the empty cars data. And yeah, based on this, you can select various different columns and plot them. Grab some Plotly output. This is defined later as plot. And then add this division thing, which is then our class that we were talking about. We've specified the server in our code. Sometimes people split this, but because we want just one file to get it done quickly, this is it. So this is how you specify X, Y, and the color, which we mentioned, which we saw in the thing above. Yes, and so here is actually where the plot is happening. Specifying plot is here. Oh yeah, and this is the name you need to match to your tag. So this corresponds to this. Yeah, and then I don't know, just some color stuff, making it look pretty, and then using Shiny app to serve both the front and the quote-unquote server, which they kind of think of as a back end. And that's what you've got. That's 79 lines of essentially some drop downs and some plots. So now we've got that. Oh, by the way, if you want to see this preview of the README, this is what happens if you open it usually. You see kind of quote-unquote raw. If you go like this, then it will give you a preview to the side and you get rid of the old one. Yeah, so because we've done everything correct, hopefully, we can just copy-paste our app run in. Share it, tells some stuff about where things are coming from. La-di-da. But this is basically the thing that we care about. This opens our app. So if we then go to a browser window and type in localhost 5000, we should see it. So this is our app. We've got the the lovely little Plotly hover stuff, all of the joys that come with using Plotly. We've got, our various different variables that we can change. That's about it. And then the footer and stuff. So this is the local version. This is what happens if you just straight up run the Rscript. So we now know that we can do that, which is exciting. Let's move on to Docker then, shall we? So if we Control-C to exit out of the code we were just running. And then we're going to grab some commands. For these commands to work, you need to make sure that Docker desktop is open already. So make sure Docker desktop is open. They have obviously the local, the hub, and some other stuff. You don't need to super worry too much about that at the moment. You will need a account to log in, but the free account is fine. You don't need anything more than that at the moment. You might need to if you want to do some crazier stuff in the future, but for the moment this is fine. So open, log in, you'll be redirected to a window in your browser to log in. And then just make sure it's open and that this thing is green. If this isn't green, then you have problems and you will need to troubleshoot them. Cool, so we've got that there, which then means we now know that we can run our Docker commands. This is basically saying build based on the Docker file that we have. Oh, good point, we should talk through the Docker file. So, the from is a kind of, let's start maybe a bit further back. So Docker has a hub that they have in which there are a bunch of images that you can kind of just use out of the box. So for example, here we are using Rocker to have a shiny Docker image to then work within. This then means that we have essentially a small instance of R and specifically the shiny environment running within our little Docker container. Oh, and also, just while we're here, a Docker container is basically, you can kind of think of it like a small machine, like in your machine, that we can like play around with. I'll show you more in depth, like what we can expect from your various things that you can do with Docker. But basically, at the beginning, we're pulling in the environment that we need to use. We are installing the R packages that we know we need. So shiny themes and Plotly, like we mentioned earlier. Rather than using cran, because it is using cran, but basically RStudio came out with this endpoint, which makes sure that the packages that you're installing are set versions. They don't change. They're essentially, how would you call it? Like, what's it called? It's just a more stable way of doing things. So what you can do here is just say, depending on what versions you want, you will get these various codes. The latest is then generally best. Although, just for certainty, I've gone back a couple days from when I'm at. And so that's all you're doing really. You're just saying, I want to get these R versions specifically from this place, and this place they make sure that things don't change too much, and thus your builds that you make will be fairly stable. You can do what you like, but this is what they recommend. And here you're just saying the working directory is set to this. Doesn't super matter. And then the working directory is the one within our container again. Here we're copying this app.rscript to within our little container. Same thing for the www, so everything in this folder will come across into our little container. And then we have Rscript, which we ran earlier. This is just saying do this. So it will hopefully do that. So let's build our image then. So Docker builds the image, and then the -t is just a tag. So we know that if we look in our Docker desktop, we should be able to find an image called this. And the dot here is important, don't forget it. The dot is just run this command within the document, and the command will look for the Docker file within the document, within the directory. And so we know within our current directory that we have obviously all of our things, and it will then find the Docker file within the directory that you're in. If you don't want to do a dot and you want to do something else, then yeah, make sure it points to somewhere where a Docker file is in. So let's do it. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah. Ooh, that seems too quick. Interesting. Is it there? It's there. That seems very quick. Oh, is it? 36 minutes ago. Interesting. In any case, the first run should take a bit longer than the last one, but this is then creates the image for you, and then this is something you can then interact with in the same way that we interact with the one from Docker Hub. So here we're just going to run that image in a container. Run is then the command, -d is to do it. What's the best way of phrasing this? -d is to essentially close the command once it's run, because usually we end up with the port like being in a window still, like in the same way that when we ran it earlier, it was just kind of listening on this thing. We don't want this to be constantly running. So that's there, and then yeah, the ports, oopsie daisy, the ports that you want to listen to. So we know that we're serving to 5,000, and so we want to make sure that the local host version is also 5,000. Yeah, and then the name of the Docker image you want to run, which we set earlier as this. So just make sure they match. And so if we do this, this should be happy. So we ran it. It is run, it is closed itself, and so we should now be able to go to Docker Hub, to the container, and see that it is running. We can then delete it if we like. We can do a bunch of other things. But in theory, if we click on this, we should be directed to our window again, which we are. Yay, with all the functionality from before. How exciting. So yeah, just to show kind of that this thing is a small machine, if you're in your containers again, these are all the logs. So what we saw printed out when we ran it locally. So this is exactly the same again. And you can open a terminal in your quote-unquote little container machine. And so here, if we do ls, because it's a Linux machine, we will just see the stuff that we copied across. So we can cd, which is also Windows, right, into www, and then we have ls, and we have the stuff that we saw. So yeah, it's a little mini machine that does stuff that you can use. And some other stuff. Oh yeah, this gives a bunch more extra things. Because we have Rscripts, this also included and stuff. It's fun to play around with, don't worry about it too much though. It's nice that they show you usage and so on, so you can look into how the deploy may cost. I mean, we are using a free service, but if you end up using a paid service, it might be nice to look at how much network usage, how much CPU usage there are, the amount of memory necessary, etc., etc. Yeah, so that's handy. Let us go back to our containers then. So we have an image that we created, and in that image we want to use what it is. And so we ran the run, which then created a container with the image running in it. Wow, that was messy. In any case, that's the local version of Docker hosting, as it were. And so now, because we have done this, we can use Docker from render. So we can just run what we did locally, but somewhere else, so then anyone else in the world can interact with it. So let's do that, shall we? Let's go to render.com. This is that. The first time that you come to render, you will need to sign in. They do Gmail, your GitHub account, or just a regular sign in. You don't need to give any card details up front. If you want better versions of what they offer, you will need to add it though. But for what we're doing, this is perfectly fine. You can see that I'm using it for a bunch of other stuff as well. But we're going to create a new web service. We are going to connect our GitHub account. So if you've cloned it, you should see instead of my name, your name here. So we're going to connect that. Also, if you don't see it in this list, then you can configure your account to to specify which repositories Render can look at. I have a bunch of stuff going on, and I don't inherently want Render to be able to see all of my accounts, so I've configured it to only look for certain things. But yeah, so we can connect here. This is then very simple stuff that we need to include. So this is just the beginning of the URL. So it will be blah, 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 .onrender.com. So for the moment, Plotly, example. Yeah, I think that's probably fine. Cool, it's running in Frankfurt. Render, as far as I'm aware, uses AWS in the back end. So Amazon Web Service is essentially where your web service is running. So when we say cloud, we mean one of the cloud service providers in general. This is most often Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, or Amazon Web Service. There are other smaller ones, but at the end of the day, these are the big three. And if you're in Europe, you just want to choose Frankfurt. Generally, it's quite good at working out where you are deploying from, and so choosing the correct one. The branch relates to the GitHub one. You could specify a different branch if there were other ones. In our one, we only have main, so it doesn't super matter. But maybe you have, I want this branch to run on Render, and I want this branch to run somewhere else. You could do that. Yeah, but in general, you can just stick with the defaults. It does default to Docker, so you don't even have to change this. The rest build the whole thing each time rather than reusing an image. So it is suggested to use Docker to speed up your stuff. The reason we have a free instance type is that it uses cold starts. So if someone's not using your service, it will power it down essentially. So there are like start times to like cold services. Maybe we can have a quick look at that. But basically, when you go to the URL, it will take a bit to fire up because we are using free services. If you use other ones, then you get your own dedicated servers, and then it will just open when it wants, or when you want it to be opened. Yeah. And then if in your app, if you have secrets and stuff like environment variables or secret files, here's the place to put it. We don't have any in this app, so we're not going to mess around with it. And you can do like extra configuration with regards to Docker or like auto deploying or whatever. We have a very simple app, so we're just going to go with the defaults there. So we're going to create the web service. Takes a little to load. This, when you first run it, opens in the logs. You can also just go to the events and then click on deploy and then go back to the logs. Everything you see here is just running through the Docker file, so we know we never wrote a Docker ignore file, so it's not there. But let's see. Yeah, so 1 of 5 find the rocker thing that we mentioned, which is now doing, which is all groovy. And then run the install of the packages, so we know that we wanted Shiny Themes, and Plotly from the specific place that we said. And it's doing the downloading, keeps going. Maybe I'll speed up this bit, maybe not. But yeah, this is how long the previous Docker build worked. It's just that I didn't realize that it would cache previous attempts, so that's why it was very quick. Yeah, maybe I will speed this up or cut this out. Let's do that. Okay, and we're back. The build is finished, as the logs that we left off. We also see the output that we saw locally, right? That we're loading ggplot and attaching other stuff, and that the thing is listening. And then on the end of it, if everything goes well, you should see this. This is something that render adds. Yeah, so that's good. Deploy started, deploy live. So fingers crossed, if we go to this link, we should see our output. And we do. So there we go. Beautiful. High fives all around. Does the link work? It does. Excellent. This was me. This was deploying via Docker and render. Have fun coding and deploying, everybody. Alrighty. Let us continue with our Shiny tutorial, our Shiny Docker deploy on render tutorial specifically. I hope you find this useful, and yeah, this is Mac specific now. The Windows version has been done, so that's good. Yeah, reason for doing this is that a bunch of people in my life are asking me how to deploy easily and quickly, and a lot of them happen to be using R, so R's the language of choice here. But yeah, if you can Dockerize your code, then you can follow along as well. It's not a huge difference when it comes to that sort of stuff. So for this tutorial, we're going to need, yeah, essentially 5 different things. One, Docker desktop. You can download it here or here, depending on what Apple Mac version you're using, what iOS you're using. You're going to need Git installed. I prefer the homebrew approach, but you have a bunch of different options if you fancy. You're going to need R installed. Yeah, make sure you get the correct package version. All of these things have fairly navigable install processes. I happen to be using Visual Studio Code for my coding, as I jump around with different languages quite often. If you're using RStudio, that also is fine. It doesn't particularly matter. And we will, yeah, of course, be deploying this repository. So make sure you have access to that. It should be public, so it should be no issue. And yeah, we're going to then deploy to Render. Render offers a free hosting setup. So if you're an individual, it will be nothing. The main thing to be aware of with it is that you have, where is it? God, what's it called? You have cold starts. I forget where they specify here, but basically, if you don't use your app for a while, then the amount of time it takes to start up again, or like on the first call, then yeah, that will be a tad longer. If you want to have what's it called? If you want to have constant up times, then you can pay for it, I guess. But in general, we're fine with this cold start. It's not too big a problem. Cool. So yeah, we'll get back to that when we get there. Let's get things started then, shall we? Let's go to our repository. I have already Git cloned this, but if you don't have the experience with this, once you have Git installed, you can do, by the way, this is all within the ZSH terminal. This should be the default for what you're doing. Yeah, there are a bunch of other options often included in what you're doing. ZSH is generally the one to go for Mac development. So we make sure that we have Git installed correctly, which we do. We're currently running this version. And then we're going to git clone into the repository. You can grab this link from the repository itself. You have 3 different ways of doing it. I have set up SSH, so that's the one I'm using, but if you haven't got this, then this should do the job for you. And if you're using the GitHub command line interface, then you can also do that. So yeah, I have done this already. so I'm not going to do it again, but essentially it would be git clone, and then, well, I mean, it's here, just this line. Cool, so that's there, and we have it open in VS Code, and we are in the correct folder. So this, of course, then corresponds to this. You don't see .git because it's a hidden folder, but if you want to, then -A will do the job. Yeah, so let's see what we've got going on with the app. It is just a simple Shiny app. Got some options that it comes with. There are a couple libraries that you need to install. Shiny, ggplot, and Shiny themes. Shiny, Plotly, and Shiny themes. ggplot you don't need to worry about because it comes with either Shiny or Plotly. I'm not 100%. The main thing we need to worry about here is that it's hosted on port 5000. And yeah, I'm loading in some styling. The custom CSS is found in www. We're adding some headers, adding a side panel that you can then choose some stuff between. Adding the footer that I made. It's a very simple HTML file. Specifying the server, so which things need to change, which is of course the drop-downs that we made, and then adding the plot that is included in the Plotly output here. This needs to match this, so that's there. Yeah, and then some just plotting, styling options. You don't need to super worry about that. But yeah, so that's what we've got. So yeah, to do the local version, we're going to go back to our README and just grab this Rscript thing. Just Command-C, Command-J to get the window back. Sorry, the terminal back, excuse me. And Command-V to get it in there. And then this will run the thing. So we can now navigate to our... geez, what even is that? It's Safari, but the generic term for Safari, which I'm blanking the name of now. I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point. In any case, go to your local host, and we know that our port is 5000, and here it is. So it exists. We're very happy with that. It does stuff. That's cool. You get all of the nice Plotly stuff that you hover, select, and whatever. Yeah, cool, dope. Got the footer that we created. We've got the colors that we like. High fives all around. Yes, so then we can stop that. So that is just our local version now. Kind of done. Let's take a look at the Docker approach. In this instance, we're going to be using two main commands. I keep forgetting that exists. The build and the run. Build creates the image. Run, yeah, as it says, runs the Docker image. Essentially creates a container that then runs what you built. Before you do this, though, make sure that Docker desktop is running and that it is happy. If this bar is not green, then you have problems that you'll need to troubleshoot. Yeah, so let's give it a crack. Let's grab this command. Oh yeah, so the build, just a breakdown quickly. Docker is then the command line thing that we're using. So if we do Docker version, we can see the Docker thing that we've got in the same way as the Rscript and the Git. So we know that we have Docker installed in the right place. The build is then, yeah, as it says, build. -T here is the tag name. So when we look at our Docker desktop, we should see something that says rshiny-docker-render. So you can call it what you like. I just happen to have called it that. And then the dot here at the end is important because it's saying run this command in the current folder. And what this command will do is look for something called a Docker file. And this is what our Docker file looks like at the moment. Yes, let's quickly run through this. So from Rocker Shiny, Docker has a hub of different kind of stock images that you can use to build your own images. And we are using the Rocker Shiny one at the moment. Basically, it's an environment that you can run Shiny apps within, so you don't need to worry about about fully setting up our like everything that we did to make the local thing work. We don't need to worry about when we use these images that come from Docker Hub. So that is that, and we can then specify the version that we want to pull. I think in the tags, then you can choose the version that you want to use. I'm just using basically the last one. These in theory should be the same, but to keep it consistent, I have specified 4. Oh yeah, it is indeed the same. The tag's the exact same. Yes, so that's that. So grab the environment, and then we're going to run an R command. R command is just R, and then the -e is then execute. So we'll run this, and at the this you can quickly see is just the regular kind of install.packages you would use in your R environment if you were just working in your R environment. And here we specify the package manager. .rstudio.com. This is something that the guys at Posit, which I think is the new name for RStudio, Posit. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Anyway, these people, they created this kind of repository that's similar to CRAN, but then also hosts a bunch of other types of stuff. So if you're using Python within this kind of setup, you can also do it here. And then Bioconductor, I think, is a big biology specific CRAN thing. So that's there. And basically the whole point of this is to make sure that you can use stable kind of snapshots of packages. So in the past, R wasn't great at maintaining versions, so things could change quickly and often within the main packages that you were using. And so this is just a way of saying, I want the shiny version, let's say, specifically from CRAN, specifically from Focal, which is a Linux type, and I want it from, I don't know, let's say, this date specifically, because I know that on this date the shiny version was great. So you can do stuff like that. Here, I've just taken the date that I'm on, and I know that these are the Linux versions I need. So that's all well and good. And then within the image, or like the container, let's say, we're creating a folder called Shiny User. You don't have to do this, but it's a bit messier than kind of working directly in the root. And then we're copying our app.r, so this one, and then putting it in the container or image, both. And then we're grabbing everything in the www folder and making it in a new www folder. We can dive into this a bit more in Docker Desktop, where you can kind of see the inner workings of your container. Think of it like a small like virtual machine, like of your own virtual machines. And then when we have all the stuff in our container and image that we need, we're just going to run the Rscript command that we saw earlier to have the output. So that's what we've got. So let's build the image. Oops, Daisy. Yep. So there it is. And if we go over to our Docker images, we now see the one that we just said. So the tag, the name that we gave it was this, of course. Here it's used a cache version, so it ran somewhat quicker than it did initially. But yeah, so that exists. Also, by the way, you will need to log in. I forgot to mention this earlier. If you're having issues with Docker Desktop, you need a login, which is free, and it's a bit of a pain often to log in and stuff. But to have access to Docker Hub, you need this this login. Anyway, where was I? So that exists. We have our build. Life is great. So that's there. And now what we're going to say is run the image that we created. So this is just the name of the image we just created. We want to do it quote unquote kind of headless. So when we ran, when we did this earlier, it left the terminal window open and just kind of listened to it constantly. When you add this -d, then you no longer have this in Docker. -p is specifying the port. So we saw in our R code that we are serving to port 5000, And so just to make sure that the port from within our container goes to the same port as our local host, so then we can access it where we expect it to be. Yeah, and then as we said, the image that we had. So if we run this, we should get the, I think it's the like full commit or tag name. I need to double look on that, but essentially it's a unique universal identifying ID. What the fuck does ID stand for? Whatever. In any case, this is the thing that we just made. And if we go back to Docker Desktop in containers, we should see our running image that we have. And we should see that the port has been revealed. And if we click on this, it should open localhost 5000 like it did before. Oh, hello. That was interesting. My computer's not happy. Oh well. Still running? Yeah, we're still running. Cool. And yeah, we have the functions that we saw from before. Yay, high fives around, zoom, blah blah blah. Footer. Sweet. Cool. So that's that. Oh, we can also get rid of that. Yeah, and then it's running. So where it's green here, you see it's running. Also, the status says it's running. If you want to see what's kind of going on the inside, you can click on the container name, and it will show essentially what we saw earlier because it's running the same command that we saw earlier. And then we have it listening on this thing, which is then grabbing the port number and sharing it to our local host. And yeah, you can open essentially a new terminal within your Docker container. So if we do this, then we see our files that we had. And because we created shiny user, if we cd up, then you will also see the shiny user that we just made and the shiny, the other shiny stuff. So for example, the stuff that we got from Rocker. Was it Rocker? Am I crazy? What's the name of it again? Yeah, Rocker. So this is that, and then the version that we requested. So you can also kind of see what comes with, what comes with the image that we got from Rocker. Oopsie daisy. Oopsie daisy. Oopsie daisy. Struggling. Yeah, so you get a profile, some logouts, some Rscripts, some other stuff I'm sure that's, that I'm not seeing. But yeah, so there we go, and then we go back into our quote-unquote user, and if we really wanted to, we could then use it as if we were using a regular terminal, so yeah, I don't know. Let's not fuck around with it too much. In any case, that's where all the stuff is, and you can think of it like a small mini machine that you can kind of put places that you want to put stuff. So let's go back. We're still going. We don't super need it anymore, but we'll just leave it be. Cool. So that was the where were we? The local and the Docker version. Let us go to deploying on render.com. So for this, you will also need a user. They support, I believe, Google single sign-on, GitHub single sign-on, or you can just use a regular username and password, I think. You will see that the sign-up or log in here instead of dashboard, but because I've logged in already, this is then there. If we click the dashboard, you can see that I've already used render for a lot of other stuff. But for the moment, we're just going to click New and Web Service. This is then the connection between your GitHub and what Render can see. So if you cloned this correctly, you should see in this list, instead of it being me, it will be you. And then, of course, the thing that we want. If you don't see it in this list, then you will need to configure your account again. I have specified certain that Render can only see certain repositories. I don't want Render to be able to see everything that I ever do, only the ones that I want to use Render for. So I've done that, but yeah, then we can connect. So this is just where the code is, basically. And then we've got a list of a couple of simple things to kind of go through. Yeah, so the name is just what we will see in front of the URL. So it will be something .onrender.com, and then that will be the URL that you can send to your mum, your friends, whoever. So we're just going to call it, no, what am I saying, Plotly? Just, it doesn't matter. It's funny, finding names for things are always the bane of existence. So that's there. The backend is, I believe, hosted in via AWS. There are kind of a couple cloud services that people kind of know of. The big three are, of course, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. AWS being Amazon, Azure being Microsoft, and Google Cloud being from Google, of course. Because we're using AWS, we know that AWS has a set of servers in Frankfurt. This is best for us because we are in the EU at the moment. Yeah, and then this is the repository branch. You can kind of choose which ones you like. At the moment, I only have a main for this thing. But if you had, let's say, 10 different branches and you knew that only one of them you wanted to go specifically to render, and then other places would be other branches, then you can do that here. Render has gone through GitHub and worked out that it's Docker. Oh, in fact, does it do this? I'm not sure. I think that might just be the default. But in theory, you could build from wherever. But because we've made Docker images, Docker files for our thing, then we're going to use Docker. And also, it is better for the load times because for all of the rest of these things, they will rebuild each time that you try to go to your website. Whereas with the Docker versions, it will just restart the Docker image. Yeah, and then you can choose the instance type. We want it to be free, so we choose the free one. If you want more performance or better uptimes or whatever, you'll likely have to pay for it. In the advanced, oh yeah, there you go. That was what I was talking about earlier. I was trying to find it in the pricing. Free services scale down when inactive. So this just means that if you don't look at it in a while, then it will take a while to start up again. Not huge amounts of times, but if it takes a bit longer to load than you'd like, that's why. Yeah, and then we have some advanced stuff. Mainly if you have environment variables in your app or secret files, think login information or connections to other things. If you have like a SQL database somewhere that your app needs to be able to connect to, these are the places to put your environment variables. We don't have any because we have a very simple app. You can do other health check stuff, other Docker specifics. If you want to change the context that the Docker build occurs, so let's say you've got, I don't know, source or something else instead of dot, then you can put it here. If you have the Docker file somewhere else, you can also put it here. A bunch of other stuff. If you want to change the command a bit, then you can do that, but the default works fine. Yeah, so, oh yeah, the auto deploy is kind of handy as well. That might be useful to know. So if you stick with the default, every time you push to main, or the branch that you specified, but it's main in this instance, it will redeploy what you've done. So your CI/CD is also kind of set up a little bit there. Yeah, so let's create the web service. Doobie doop doop doop. So here we are. This, by the way, opens in logs. Yeah, if you come back to it, then you'll start in events most likely. And then if you want to go to your logs, you can click the deploy. This is what you would have seen if I had done the local version of the Docker. If I'd not done the local version of the Docker before, so each number will show something. So in this moment, where were we? Let's see if I can find it very quickly. In fact, let's maximize, see what's going on a bit better. Yeah, so this was the first one. We said grab me stuff from Rocker Shiny, and then just whatever number 4 was. And we also said, what else did we say? Number 2 was to install the R packages, I think, with the looks of things. Yeah, so please install the stuff. So here it is installing the stuff. And then we have like some copy files and so on that if we look back at our Docker file. So each one is numbered. So this was the first one, this is the one that's currently running, and these are the last ones. This generally takes a while because there's quite a lot of stuff to install. So I think I will do a bit of a jump cut. Okay, and we are back. So at the end of this, we see the stuff that we saw at the end of our build locally, that is listening on 5000. So that's rather exciting. Quickly minimize. And yeah, you should get a green thing that says live here. So fingers crossed, if we navigate to our endpoint, which we have, yeah, we should be able to see the output that we wanted. So high fives all around. Job well done. Send this to your friends, family, children, and show them how amazing your new app is. Yeah, so that's great. Also, if you want to no longer host this thing, it's not a huge problem because it's free, of course, but if you decide I'm done with this, you can go to the settings and scroll to the very bottom, and it has delete web service, and you can grab this and copy paste it in and then delete the web service. But yeah, I'm going to, well, it's my goal to keep this this live version for as long as this place is free, which in theory should be hopefully forever. We'll see. So you can access this from the GitHub. I'll put it below this bit here, so you can play with it if you do not want to do the steps yourself. Cool. Thank you for listening. Till next time.